Hey guys, I wanted to do a follow-up video again on how to use MUDBOX to create textures in Unity for Pro Builder specifically. It's a really good tool. I mean, MUDBOX is a little bit limited in what you can do in terms of sculpting and painting, but it is pretty good for doing tiling textures. And I want to show you a really quick way to do tiling textures in MUDBOX and then export them out and use them in Unity for Pro Builder, which is a really good use case. So when you open up MUDBOX, you're going to get something like this. What do you want to do? You can go ahead and close that. Don't need to use that. But what we're going to do is inside MUDBOX, we're going to go up to Create. We're going to go down to Tiling Plane. It's going to give us this little window. How do we want to set it up? Plane properties, 4x4 quads is fine. We can increase the resolution as needed. Repeating tiles, 3x3, this is perfect. What this means is in the representation they're going to give you for the tiling, what do you want it to look like? So we're going to repeat it 3x3. And then create target for extraction. That's important because we're going to use that to actually export the tile that we make out of MUDBOX as a tile set. Okay, so we want to make sure that's checked. So we're going to say create tiling plane. And it's going to give us this rather large tiling plane. You can go ahead and zoom out with your scroll wheel so you can see it. And you'll see right here we now have our tiling plane that we can use. Now, the first thing I'm going to do before I start getting into the sculpting is I just want to define where my area is at so I know where I can actually sculpt. And I can also rough out some details, especially what I want to sculpt. So I think for this one I'm going to do like a, I don't know, we'll do like a repeating skull kind of embedded stone wall or something like that with like a skull detail. We'll see how that looks. All right, so in here, partly because I like doing dark stuff too, so that's always fun. All right, so we'll come in here and I'm going to go to my paint tool. I'm going to reduce the brush size a little bit, and I'm just going to click on the tiling plane. You'll see right away it's going to say, okay, let's make a paint layer. We're going to make it 2048, and we're going to use the diffuse channel. Okay, make sure it's a PNG, say okay. So in here, all I'm going to do is with my paint brush selected, let's come into my paint settings, and I'm just going to lightly kind of hit the board here so I can figure out where my, let me see, I just want to figure out where the top, see I'm just kind of lightly doing it to see where the top of my box is. I'm going to do the same at the bottom, and the sides look like it's right about there. So if I come over here, I just want to know where those edges are so I have like a boundary to work with, right? See how it repeats on every single one of these? The only reason I'm doing that is just to kind of see where I'm at. I can get rid of this later and paint over it, but it's just there for me to kind of see what I'm going to do. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is, now that I have this boundary kind of marked out, reduce my brush size. I'll go B, like that. And I'm going to go ahead and paint little skull. Let's see, let's do it right here. We'll come to mirror, we'll go mirror on the X, and I'm just gonna go ahead and paint, rough out the shape of like a, I don't know, a skull. Sometimes I like to trace what I'm gonna draw before I actually get it in here. We'll just do something like this. I always like to do like skulls and stuff just because I'm a big tabletop gamer and I've always kind of been into the darker stuff, so it's kind of why I go for that as my thematic choice. So we'll do something like that and make a little, there we go, kind of like a little design like that, all right? And let's see, maybe it's gonna have like a plate or something that it's built up on, or inset in, so we'll kind of do that, and then we'll make a little boundary for it, something like this. And again, I'm just sketching out these details. I'm gonna come in and actually sculpt these in a second, but just kind of seeing where I want to put stuff. And we'll put some lines here, more lines here, more lines here for the bricks. Put one at the bottom here, and one at the top. Great. Okay. Now what we can do is come into our sculpting brush. We have this already set. I'm going to go Shift D to increase my levels. So I'm going to go from Shift D, level 1, to level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5. That's probably pretty good. Let's go level 6. Let's go 5. If your computer can handle it, go down. You can always change the levels by paging up and paging down if you need to. I'm going to go to 6. You know what? Let's go to 5, and then we'll go up to 6 if we need to add more detail. All right, so page up, page down. I'll go through your levels when you have them. Now I'm going to go to my sculpt tools, And on here, I am going to use my sculpt brush. The first thing I'm going to do is start sculpting my skull here. Now I have my mirror set on, so that will let me do both sides at once. So this is great. I can come in here and just start sculpting this guy out. Sculpt a little, let's brush a little bit bigger. And we'll just start sculpting. Seeing how I want this design to look. And I'm just kind of doing a rough sculpt. Now, keep in mind, this is just going to be a repeating texture, so we don't need to get too crazy on the details. You also don't want to pull out too much of what you're doing. Remember, the shift key also will blend whatever you've sculpted. So if you've got like peaks and valleys, hold shift and just kind of scrub over it, and you'll be able to kind of blend a lot of those details out, right? Something like that. Control, instead of pulling out, so when you sculpt, right, when you're sculpting an area, you're pulling out, right? But if you hold control, you'll push in. So like areas like these eyes right here, I'll push those in a little bit, so those are pretty deep. All right, little cracks. Features, I'll kind of push in a little bit. Maybe just around, I'll reduce my brush size here, around the edge of this guy. I'm gonna hold control and I'm just gonna push in around him. So I'm just kind of sculpting these details out. And you could use whatever you want to use, but this should give you an idea what to do. Now I am using a pen to do this. You can do it with a mouse. Just the only downside is if you're using a mouse, you're gonna have to go back and forth to the strength here and adjust that to really low strength and probably the highest of 10. So it's kind of a game with that back and forth. If you're looking to get a tablet, a cheap tablet, I'd recommend getting one of the cheaper Wacom's that are out there, like the Bamboos or something like that, to work with. Or there's a couple other lines nowadays that are much cheaper. I'm just kind of going over these details real quick. All right. See if I can pull out some of these details a little bit. That's looking pretty cool. Sculpting around these details like so. Okay, great. We've got this nice little front plate done. Now what I can do is, I might even push down a little bit more in here just to kind of push this area. It looks like a little more engraved. So I'll come in there and just kind of just sculpt around in there. Also makes it look like it's hand carved. All right, and then I'll just smoothing brush to kind of smooth that out. That looks good. Okay. I'll come in here and I'm going to start sculpting out these bricks. Great. So now that I have the baseline kind of done of the sculpt, I'm going to go ahead and turn my mirror off. Let's turn that off. Let's go back to our paint tools. Come here. Go back to my paintbrush, and I'm going to just fill this whole thing in, because I know where I'm sculpting now. I'm going to use my color here. So we'll go to like a gray. Maybe we'll use like a tan, something like that. Then we come down to flood paint layer. There we go. All right, so now we've got our sculpt and our paint layer done. And you'll see I've got these nice areas to actually do some sculpt work, right? So I'm gonna go back to my sculpt tools and again, turn my brush off. All right, great. So now that this is set up, what I can do is, with my mirror off, now I can use control and just kind of carve into where I want these bricks to be, right? So I've already got the baseline done. So now it's just a matter of having fun with the actual sculpt and doing some stuff that's a little asymmetrical, right? So trying to get the look of this a little asymmetrical. We'll come in and just kind of sculpt these bricks out. where they make the most sense. It's actually looking pretty good. And let's see, let's kind of define these side ones here a little bit. Something like that. Then maybe come in with an even smaller brush. And you know what, I'm gonna turn up my detail to the highest level, so 6. And in here, I can just sculpt some little nice refined details in here, right? So I can get some cracks and things of that nature in my bricks here. All divots. Maybe add some asymmetrical details into the skull itself, right? Something like that looks pretty good. Then let's see, I'm gonna look at my brushes here. I'm gonna grab the foamy brush, this one right here, and increase the brush size a little bit. Bring my detail level down a little bit. And I'm just gonna go around the edges of some of these to help kind of pull them out a little bit. I'm doing brickwork like this, I always like to use the foamy brush and kind of hit the edges here. And I'll come in with the wax brush and then kind of smooth it out. All right, so I'll come in and kind of accentuate the edges here. Right here, right there. Something like that. And then I'll come in with, like I said, the wax brush. Let me add a little bit of detail to the edge right here. I'll come in with the wax brush right here. And this just helps kind of flatten out some of these areas a little bit. I'm gonna blend it into the other one, maybe make the brush a little bit bigger. A little bit if you need to. All right, so something like that. That looks pretty good. Again, this is just a quick texture, but something that I'll try to make look cool, right? Okay, that looks pretty good. Now what we can do is actually we'll paint an actual texture on here. So I already have this kind of tan color. So what I like to do is go back to my paint tools now, and I'll add in my shadows. So I'll go with the burn tool and just kind of go in where these crevices are and just go all the way around my model here and just hit up all of these little crevices with this burn tool just to darken in where all these little cracks are. It's almost like a wash in a way, right? You come in here. Some of them you don't want to go like right in between the lines. You kind of want to have that little bit of a fade between these areas. All right, here and there. And just kind of go all the way around your model or your sculpt. And just try to fill in those areas as needed. You can do a bigger brush too. You know, some areas you want to make darker than others. Go ahead and do that. It'd be nice to make this maybe a little bit darker on the bottom here. Give it a chance to update. We'll come into the eyes right here. We'll make those really dark in there. good. Just come in there. And what's cool is MUDBOX has a really nice kind of dry brushing feature also. So once we get this a little bit darker, we can come in with a lighter brush, start to kind of expand out these details. All right, so that's looking okay. All right. And if you want, you know, sure, good Major, I'm gonna add a little bit darker in some of these side areas right here. So I think I'll make it pop a little bit more. Kind of something like that. Okay. Now what you can do is, if you want, you can come into your actual, if we go to our layers and right click on our layer, just say adjust the color. You can change like the saturation levels. So I'm actually going to make it a little bit more saturated like that. The value lighter or darker if you want, you can kind of do that. You can also change the hue if needed. So I'm going to stick with something kind of like that. Say okay. And then I'm going to come in with another layer for color. So I'm going to come in here and say new layer, and I'm going to do another diffuse layer, and I'm just going to make it a color layer. And we'll use this for, I guess we'll do the skull part, right? So let's go ahead and grab the paintbrush, and we'll choose a lighter color, something like that. And for the mixing mode, so just like Photoshop, they have their overlay mode, or what type of mixing mode you want. So we'll come in here and we'll say, you know what, let's do color. I'm gonna use this bright color right here. I'm gonna come into my skulls. My brush size is a little bit smaller. And I'm just gonna color. That's actually coming out there. Let's see. All right, let's try, maybe not color, let's see. Oh really? Oh, there we go. Okay, it is coming in. Let's do normal first so we can see it. Normal. Huh. That's weird. Hold on. Oh, it's there. Interesting. That's really, really light. But okay, whatever. Let's just keep doing it. Try to color this in. Let me see if I can brighten this. Actually, you know what you can do? If you can't see the color, right click outside and say flat lighting. There we go. That'll help you see. And if we go to wireframe, wireframe's not really going to help. You can see, but interestingly, that is not coming in that bright. Oh, you know what? It's using the stamp image. Take that off. There we go. That's what was going on. I had the stamp selected. So I'm going to come back to, there we go. That's what I'm looking for. Okay. That was strange. Come here. I'll just paint up this skull really quickly. So what I can do is go to color, see how it looks in the mixing mode. So kind of mess around with these, right? Kind of arrow through them. Lighting looks pretty good. Or screen. And, you know, we'll use screen and then we'll turn it down a little bit, something like that. That's looking pretty good. I'll make another, actually I'll just keep on the same layer. I'm going to color in this metal around it. So we'll do like a gray color, so done. And we'll just kind of color in this grayish metal insert here. Something kind of like that. Okay, again, what I'm going to do now is now I have the pieces colored. I'm going to go ahead and right click and say merge visible. That'll bring all those paint layers together. And then what I can do is come in with my dodge tool and do some highlighting on some of these areas. So on some of these bricks here, I can just come in and actually highlight the tops of them a little bit. Bring your brush size down a little bit. Just kind of pseudo draw in where the light would hit some of these areas. Top the skull a little bit. Painting a light source on here a little bit. Okay, something like that. Does that look done? Not yet. Here, let's just keep going. Let's add a little bit more to it. All right. Okay. Great, something like that. I'm gonna add a secondary color just to kind of offset all of this. So let's come in and make a new layer. Let's make another color overlay. I'm just gonna do a mix of colds and warms to kind of just give this some variation. So I'm gonna come to my paintbrush and literally just paintbrush. All right. We're gonna get like a nice blue, so we'll do something like that. And we're gonna turn it down a little bit, and we'll just do like an overlay mode, overlay like that. And bring this up a little bit. We'll just start hitting up the corners of these bricks with this blue. All right, so that does that nice blending. All right, so something like that. Bottom parts of the bricks is what I'm aiming for. Just kind of get these corners going. This corner, this corner, this corner. I'm kind of like coloring in some pseudo ambient light into that, right? Okay. I'll probably do the same inside this metal little plate right here. You can go over to the skull a little bit, it's kind of cool. Do that, just to offset that off just a little bit. Great. And you can even mess around with some different blues, something like this. And this is purely for style, like I'm not really, you don't have to do this in your texture. This is just, when I'm doing textures, kind of my process, just kind of hit these areas up a little bit with blues. Just to give it, you know, when you look at something, it's actually never all just one color. There's actually a spectrum of colors that are hitting objects. So you want to make sure you kind of add some of that in there. It just helps add a little bit more life to whatever you're creating. All right, something like that looks good. Great. Now I'll come in with a more of a warmer color, like a warm brown kind of. Again, just kind of hit up some of the top areas with this warmer kind of brown. And I'm just kind of dotting around in here. I'm not like being super careful. I'm just trying to get a mix of colds and warms, right? You see it really starts to kind of make that texture pop when you do that, right? On the skull, that's when I warm in there a little bit. That's looking good. Okay. And you know what, I'm going to do one final pass with some darks on here. So we'll come in here and I'm going to merge it all down again. I'm going to merge and I'm going to come in here with the burn tool and let's just do one final pass with this burn tool to really kind of draw out some of these areas. I really want to accent this whole piece right here, so I'm just going to kind of pull this out a little bit. And again, this is just a really quick texture, but it's actually looking kind of cool. Come in here, pull out the areas we need. these cracks right here. That's looking pretty good. Great. Okay. If you really want to, you can come in and just kind of color in some dark in some of these areas. That looks good. Okay, so we've got a nice little texture going. Let's add a little detail to the texture, just with like one of these stamps here, or even stencils we can come in. I think they have this is a grimy one, right? So we can go grime like that. And what's cool about this texture is, or this stencil is, it's just gonna let us, I can change the size of this too if I need to, like bigger like that. It's gonna let us kind of color in some of that griminess, just to give this a little more scratches and things like that. And I'm just using the burn tool to do this. So I got burn tool coming in with that, just kind of scratching that up. You can reverse it with the dodge tool if you want. Maybe on the tops and stuff, kind of hit some of these pieces hit. All right, and then hit the S key to turn it off. Or sorry, Q, turn it off. See, I just added all that extra kind of little texture detail in there. All right, makes it a little dirtier. So we added that. That's looking pretty good. Let's see. Oh, yeah, we can do some dry brushing if we want. So if we come in here with, let's say white, we just color over the model a little bit. See how it'll just hit these areas that are the high spots of the model, right? So what you want to do actually here, let me go ahead and delete that. If I go in to make another layer, so if I just say new layer, and with bigger brush size up here, and we just start, that might be a little intense. Hold on. Let's go less of a brush size. Start hitting up the areas you want to highlight with the dry brush, kind of like that. Just like if you were dry brushing a model, just come in and kind of hit those areas up like that on the top part, maybe where the light would hit. All right, and then change the overlay mode so we can do like overlay, or if we did screen, let's see, multiply. No, I'd go back to. Let's go back to or let's do hard light. There we go. And then turn it down a little bit. All right, we can kind of like accent just some of those high areas. All right, so that looks pretty good. Okay, great. So we've got our texture set up. So here's our nice repeating texture. I'm gonna add some emissive to it as well, just to kind of give it a little bit extra. So I'm gonna make another layer. And again, there's different layers and channels that you can paint, and you'll see them in here in the channel settings. So you've got diffuse, incandescence, gloss, specular. We could do a lot more. We can even mess with just the normals themselves and paint layers with that, or bump maps if we wanted to. But we have a sculpt layer, so we're not really worried about that. But if I came in with incandescence, right, and said okay, and then in my incandescent layer, let's say I wanted to do a nice glowing green, right, so something like that. And let me just turn my brush size down a little bit and paint in here. You can actually paint light on your model as well. So let's say we want those eyes lit up like that, right? And then maybe I just make a slightly bigger brush size right here and just kind of just subtly paint around that area. Then I might make it a little bit smaller. Something like that. All right. You'll see you can paint that light into that model, right? Get in there. Let me just try to get in that area and paint in there. All right, and then actually, if I came into the model itself, let me just. Let's get all that. I did a weird. There we go. Okay, and if I came into the actual model itself and painted on the first color, like a greenish color in there, that's really gonna pop in there if we do that. So we come in here and say, you know, let's make the interior there a little So what's cool about that is we'll have an incandescent layer that we can export out too. So inside of Unity, we can mess with that emissive. It will turn into a emissive layer that we can, adjust the intensity as needed, right? So that looks pretty good. We've got a nice little repeating texture. So to export it out, so what you need to do that is, if we go back in our little layer tabs right here, we have object list. In here, we have two things. We have our tiling plane and our extraction target. Okay, just remember these two. Tiling plane, extraction target, right? So what we need to do to extract this image is, if we go up to, I believe it's UVs and maps right here, and then we go to extract texture map, go to new operation. And in this, we'll just call this, we'll get our textures first. And actually, you know what, to get a quicker way to get the textures, here's just a little hack, right? If we go to our layers menu, and in here, if we just, we say merge visible, and then just right click it, and then say export selected, and then put it into a folder on your desktop where you have it, and just call it something like skull texture, right? And then say save. It'll save out that PNG of what you have right here. So it's actually the image of this, which is, if we go to our flat lighting, that right there, it's gonna save that PNG image out, right? Back to my sculpted layer, right? But to get the ambient occlusion, which is the light and shadow data, as well as the normal maps, we need to use the extraction method. So when I go to extract texture maps, go to new operation, we're just gonna call this normals, like that. And we'll click on normal map. And so what we need to do is tell it what we want to extract. So if I go to my object list and tiling plane, so our target model, first thing right here, we need to make sure extraction target is selected, and we are going to say add selected, okay? For source models, we're going to click on our tiling plane. That's our source that has all our sculpture detail, and we're going to say add selected, all right? Method, we're going to change this to subdivision. Raycasting doesn't work the greatest. Generate one map for all targets, that's fine. We're going to say 2048, 2048. Edge bleed, use global, that's great. Anti-aliasing, we can turn that on or off if you need it. We'll do two. Compatibility, we want the tangent space of the normals, that's fine. Texture map, we want a texture, and its base file name. Let's go ahead and change that to skull texture, and I'll just add normal to this. NRM is fine. Save, make it a PNG, and then we're going to say extract. You'll see it's extracting down here, this little preview. It said extraction finished successfully. Okay. And if I go ahead and look in my folder where I have my MUDBOX things, let me just drag it here so we can see it really quickly. There you go. You should get two maps. You should get your texture as well as your map. These are some other ones I'd done for a previous build. But I have my actual texture, and then I have the normal map that's associated with it, right? So this is that kind of sculptural detail. But now we also want our emissive too. So to get that, literally, it's as easy as just going into your layers. And we have this incandescence right here. I can just right click on it and say export selected. And again, we'll put it in here. We'll just call it skull texture emiss, right? We'll say save. And now we'll have our three maps that we can actually use to do some stuff inside of Unity. Next video, I'm going to show you just bringing them into Unity, also setting up our emissive map in Photoshop, so that actually works as an emissive in Unity as well. Then we should be good to go.